All right. So we are in Masechet Nazir, Daf Lamed Bet. We are at the Mishnah near the bottom of Lamed Aleph Lamed Bet, about 9, 10 lines up, maybe 12 lines up. Let me just get my notes and put them up on the screen. And so here. And so what we have been talking about, we actually learned this Mishnah twice yesterday. We learned this Mishnah once as it was referenced by Tosos. Tosos, in the opening Tosos, noted the fact that Beit Hillel was going to, why did we start this chapter with a discussion of somebody who makes something hektish by mistake? And the answer is because one of the answers was because Beit Hillel is going to reply and ask Beit Shammai a question and say, listen, Beit Shammai, your position in the case that we're about to read seems inconsistent with your position in connection with making something hektish by mistake. Because when it comes to making something hektish by mistake, Beit Shammai says that the object is hektish. So in any event, so that was one time that we saw it. And then we saw it in the Gemara because we were asking the question whether Beit Shammai really holds that making something a mistake, making something hektish by mistake does not make something hektish, because after all, it seemed like that was the way our read of that first Mishnah was going. And we said, well, one second, what about Beit Hillel's question that we're going to have in this Mishnah? Doesn't that show that Beit Shammai says that actually if you make something hektish by mistake, it's actually hektish? And we answered, no, maybe Beit Hillel is mistaken. In the end, we found out that in fact Beit Shammai does hold that a mistake is making something hektish by mistake does make it hektish, but you can't necessarily prove it from the two first Mishnayos of this chapter. So those were the two times that we saw it yesterday. And so now we're going to learn this Mishnah inside. And so here we go. We are again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines up. 12 lines up from the bottom of 31b. And so the Mishnah discusses someone who wants out of their Nizirut. Misha Nadar ben Nazir, if somebody said that they're going to made a vow that they're going to be a neder, that they're going to be a Nazir. And then we'll see in the, let's just jump right into Rashi, because I know that Mark likes to do Rashi. So jump right into the Rashi, and Rashi says on the Mishnah 1, 2, 3, end of the 6th to last line on the wide lines on Lamed Aleph Hamabet, and it says v'nizkar shita b'nazirato. So at that moment, after the person has made himself a Nazir and he realizes that he made some kind of mistake while becoming a Nazir, and he began to regret his decision to become a Nazir. And you know what he then did? Not that he should do it, but he did, is he started to violate his Nazirut. V'shasa yayin, and he drank wine. V'mit molomesim, and he became tamei to the dead. V'achar kach halach, and now afterwards he's sort of set himself up for a bad position. He goes v'nishal l'chachamim lahater naziruto, and he goes and asks in order to get out of his Nazirut. So we jump now back into the last words of this Rashi, or this Mefarish, is in fact sort of the language of our Mishnah. The nishal, as the next words of the Mishnah are v'nishal l'chacham v'asaro, and so he went and he asked a chacham to get out of his vow, and what happens? V'asaro. The chacham here, the guy thinks that he's going to be able to get out of his vow, but the chacham says, I'm sorry, what you think is a mistake that allows you out turns out not to be such a mistake. And we will see that kind of issue over the course of today. We will see the kind of thing where the person might have said, oh my gosh, I made a humongous mistake, you have to let me out. And in the end, we will say, no, I'm sorry, that's not the kind of mistake that we will allow you to get out for. So And so what happens in that situation? Mona Misha Shanadar. Even though he has spent the last few days violating his Nazirut, he is able to count the time that from when he made the vow. Now we are going to adjust this language a little bit as a result of the Gemara's understanding, because we'll see that actually simply allowing the person to count every day when he was a Nazir towards his Nazirut, even though he was not observing his Nazirut, is not the opinion of either of two opinions that we will see in a brisa. But at the moment, let's just read it the way it's written. And so as a result, even though he was violating his Nazirut from day 2 to day 12, when he finally got around to asking, it turns out that all those days count towards his Nazirut. So Nisha l'chacham v'hitiro. Now, if in fact, on the other hand, he had asked the question and the chacham that he asked had released him and annulled the vow, if he in fact had already set aside an animal for the end of his Nazirut, that animal is not in fact hektish, because here he had undone his Nazirut, and so as a result, since his Nazirut was a causal factor for his setting aside this animal, turns out that he does not need to, that the animal is not in fact hektish because he didn't need to set it aside. So Amru Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel asked Beis Shammai. So again, in yesterday's Mishnah, we said that if you make a mistake in your making something hektish, Beis Shammai says it is hektish. So Beis Hillel, but here everybody agrees that this animal can go out to the flock. So Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, Amru Beit Hillel Beit Shammai, Iatem modim bezeh. Here you were admitting to me. So well, shehu hektish tos. This is of course this is a mistaken consecration. Shetzei v'tira be'eder, and yet it is able to go out with the flock, meaning it is not hektish. So how come by the other case you are not saying that exact same thing? Well, Amru Lahem, Beit Shammai says back to them, and now we're going to see that Beit Shammai is not going to answer the question, but he's going to respond to the question with his own question. So, Iatem modim, second, you should admit to me, if you, in fact, when you're counting off animals for Meiser Behema. So let's back up and just note what Meiser Behema is. There is a mitzvah in the Torah that each year you take your animals, you count them out, and the 10th one you bring to Yerushalayim and you offer it as an offering. And it's sort of like Meiser Sheni, where the person themselves get to eat it. It's just you need to eat it in Yerushalayim. So.
10th of all your animals or 10th of all your new animals?
I'm pretty sure it's a 10th of all the animals, not just the new animals, but I have to double check that because it occurred to me as I was asking it. I'll have to double check. I'm sure that the notes says it here, but I'm blanking on it at the moment. What? No, that would not, because you cannot offer a donkey or an ass as a I know. So you're absolutely right. I should not have said all animals or animals in the broad sense. It's specifically animals that are offered on the altar. It's specific animals, sheep and no pigs. Absolutely not. We don't eat pigs. So yes.
It's by year. It's separate tithe by year of birth.
It's by year of birth. Okay, thank you for helping me.
In the Mishnah, all the way up to the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, as to when you set the new year for the tithe of animals.
Okay, so thank you for. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much for reminding us. So the principle is that it's animals born within a certain period. There, as Charlie notes, there's a machloket about when that period begins and ends. But the bottom line is that those new animals that were born during that year, so that ends up being set aside. One of every 10 gets set aside. Now, what happens if you do the following? You count like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9, 10. because you realize, whoops, I skipped 9 and I got to 10 a little too soon. And so I made the 9th one number 10. But then I said, oh, I'll fix it. I'm going to count the 10th one as number 9. And then because I counted number 9, I went straight to 10 again. Well, in that situation, the halacha is that all three, numbers 9, 10, and 11, are hektish. All of three of them end up having to be hektish. But if I were to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, so I skipped 8 and 9, or I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, 10. And so I did number 12 as a potentially hektish one, then it would not become hektish. So Beit Shammai says to Beit Hillel, if you go 10, 9, 10 with respect to the 9th, 10th, and 11th animal, and we say all of them shehu mukudash, all of them are going to be sanctified. So doesn't that show that when you make a mistake, that in fact that mistake is hektish? So isn't that a better proof for me, for my position, which is to say that it is hektish? The response back is no. Amru lahem Beit Hillel lo hashevet kidsho. Are you saying that when the rod paints, they would paint a little red mark on the animal to indicate washable mark that indicate that was the one that was chosen, so that we wouldn't get confused? And are you saying that that's what defines the animal, meaning that if you even were to do the 8th and the 10th, but if you in fact were to mark the 8th or the 12th, shema asa klum, have you done anything? No, you have not done anything. So therefore, alakasav shekidish hasiri hu kiddush hatishi, as we turn that achadasar. And so as a result, we see that in fact it is only due to psukim that are in the Torah that in fact the 9th and the 11th are have the theoretical possibility of being kodesh. And so it's not about a mistake; it's about what the Torah enables and not or not. So we'll take a quick look at the last Rashi on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Bet, and it continues on the top of Lamed Bet. So Kolomar. So again, Rashi, this is Mefarish explaining Beit Hillel's position. Lo lekach mekudesh shi'i ve'echad asar sheyehei mitkadesh b'shevet. That it's not the rod that avar aleihem. It is not the rod that passes over them that is causing the 9th and the 11th animals to become tahor, b'taot, when you're making a mistake. The kore lo asiri, because you called it the 10th. The teidashe eno mitkadesh b'shvil hashevet. It's not because of the rod that it became kodesh. Ma ilu taha v'hiniach hashevet al hashmini v'al hashnemasar. Because if in fact you were to make a similar mistake and put the rod on the 8th or the 12th, v'sakro b'sikra, and you ended up coloring it, mi yesh b'hakdasho klum, would that making it sanctified cause anything? No, it would not. Elamat tam mukudashin shi'i ve'achadasar she'oto kasav shekidish et ha'asiri kidish et ha'shi ve'achadasar. That the reason that it all becomes kodesh is because of the pasuk, and the pasuk caused that the 9th and the 11th would also be avalo shmini b'shnei, but not the 8th and the 12th. Because this is what we learned at the beginning, the last parak of Masechet Bechoros. Tanu Rabbanan minayin she'im karo l'tshiv asiri v'lasiri tchi'i u'lachadasar asiri sheshalashtan mikudashin. How do I know what our Mishnah referred to? That if you call them by 10, 9, 10, the 9th, 10th, and 11th animals, you call them 10, 9, 10, that all three of them become kodesh. Talmud Lomer v'chol ma'asar bakar tvatzon. The pasuk says all of the animals, so it implies that there will be more than just the ones that just the 10th one, the gomer. And you continue. The hasiri yeh kodesh. So the 10th one is going to be kodesh. Asiri l'rabot et kulan. So the 10th one tells us that it comes to include all of them. So Yachol, I might have thought Sha'ani Mar Be'af Chet Nushnemasar that I should also include the 8th and the 12th ones. So Amra Ma'asara B'Samachlo, Avkol B'Samachlo. So we learned that since the 10th one implies those that are close to the 10th one, so only those that are close to the 10th one, and Yatsu Chet Ve'Yebet, and so the 8th and the 12th do not get included. And so as a result, the Beit Hillel's response is, look, you can try and give a proof from the fact that we have that we do with Meiser Behema, that if you accidentally make a mistake and you say about the 9th animal that it's the 10th animal that it's Kodesh, but that is a very limited rule, and it is sourced based on a pasuk in the Torah, so it can't create a general rule for other situations. And so that's Beit Hillel's response. Now, what about Beit Shammai? Doesn't he have a response? So, in fact, Tosos does have a suggestion for a response. It's the Tosos at the top of Lamed Aleph on Bet. So if we go back to Lamed Aleph on Bet, it says Nishal Lachacham V'Hitziro, right? So you ask a Chacham and it became mutter. So Kolomer Sha'amar Lo Sha'ota Kabbalah Lav Klumhi, that you said to the Chacham when you're asking it in this situation that you made a mistake, you say that, listen, it shouldn't be any kind of neder. Shalom nader b'lashon tov. I didn't use the right language. L'kabel nazirut, to accept the nazirut. V'nimtza lo chal alav nazirut. And so as a result, it should be that I didn't accept the nazirut. Afilu rega achad, even for just a moment. So haita lo behem furashas. And so as a result, if in fact my vow gets annulled, if I had separated an animal, shehifrish l'naziruto kodem shenishal l'chachamim, that if he asks, if he has this animal that he separated before he asked the chachamim, tzeitze v'tira be'eder im behemotav, it could go out and graze with his flock with the rest of his animals. Shehein chulin, because it's gemurim, because it is completely non-sanctified. The kaven did nazirut lo chalala, because the nazirut did not fall on him. He's no longer covered by the nazirut, or he was in fact never covered by the nazirut. Ein kan hektish tos klal. There isn't even a mistaken hektish here at all. And so therefore, va'afilu Beit Shammai modu d'davka kisha amar shor shachor sheyatza rishon yehei hektish v'yatza lavan hasam halavan hektish. It's only in the case that we had in our first Mishnah that's a mistake. But in our case, Laman da Amar B'Gemara Mishum She'ein Choshesh V'Rotza Sheyachol Hektish, we're in a case where the guy says that I wanted it to be Hektish. So Gam Al Halavan, even on the white one, namely that was Abaye's opinion that we saw yesterday. So we'll stop there. But the point is that we see that Tosfos explains that for Beit Shammai's response to Beit Hillel's question is that, yes, in a regular mistake situation, I would say that my animal would be hektish. But here, this is even less than a mistake, because my whole nazirut was undone. And so everything that relates to my nazirut, it gets undone associated with it. And so it's completely like a retroactive never happened. And so a complete do-over. And so that would be Beit Shammai's response to Beit Hillel's potentially good question. So that's our Mishnah. And now we're ready to take on the Gemara. So the Gemara is going to wonder who the author of our Mishnah could be. Because, again, we said at the start of our Mishnah that if, in fact, the person fails to observe their Nazirut, at least that is how we understand it according to the Mefarish, that the person failed to observe the Nazirut, and yet they get to count all of their days of failing to observe the Nazirut towards their Nazirut. So Mani Masnisin, who is our Mishnah? Lo Rabbi Yossi, below Rabbanan. It's neither Rabbi Yossi nor the Rabbanan. The time, because we have a brisa Misha Nadar va'avar al Naziruto. If somebody made a vow to become a Nazir and then he violated that vow, Ein is kakin lo. Those days do not count to him. Or I'm sorry, Ein is kakin lo. We do not make we don't enable him. Ella im kain moda behen isur. unless he counts the days where he that he did not do the right thing, where he did the violation. B'yamim shenahag b'hem heter, to make up for the days that he did, in which he acted as if he was allowed to do anything. So Rabbi Yossi Omer dayo shloshim yom. So that was the Tanakama's opinion, was that you have to make up all of the days, and Rabbi Yossi says no, you only have to make up 30 days. Well, 1 second, neither of those opinions match what our Mishnah said, because Rabbanan, and now we're going to follow the language adjustments that the Rosh and Tosfos make here. So if you want to take a look at the Rosh, that will make your life a little easier, or you can look in Tosfos as an alternative. So Rabbanan Kashya Naziros Miruba. Well, 1 second, if you want to say that our Mishnah is like the rabbis, well then, even in the case of a long Nazirut, we've got a problem, because the rabbis, the Tanakama position in the Brisa that we just said you have to make up every single day. And so there is never a situation where one of the days that you fail to observe your Nazirut, that you get to count that towards your Nazirut, because you have to make up day for day. So whether you have a short Nazirut of only 30 days or a long Nazirut of 100 days, and if you fail to observe 50 of those 100 days, tough luck, you have to repeat those 50 days. That's the way we're going to treat you. And Rabbi Yossi, and if you want to say it's Rabbi Yossi, Kasha Nazirut Mu'etes, then a short Nazirut is problematic. So yes, when you have 100 days and you fail to observe 50 of the days, there will be 20 days that you don't have to re-observe, because you only have to, according to Rabbi Yossi, observe 30 days as a makeup. But when it comes to a 30-day Nazirut, no matter how many days of Nazirut you fail to observe, you are going to have to restart and completely repeat all of those days. So that's that's going to be yes, just 30 days, correct. Well, no, up to 30 days, So let's go do some examples. So if you had a Nazirut of 100 days and you realize on day 3, oh my gosh, I don't think it was a good Nazirut. So now on day 3 to day 53, you violate your Nazirut. According to the Tanakama, you are going to have to, 3 to 53 is a total of 51 days. So you're going to have to make up all 51 days that you made a mistake. Because at the end of 51 days, you go and ask the rabbi, and the rabbi says, sorry, that's not the kind of mistake that allows you out of your vow. So you're going to have to repeat all 51 days. But when it comes to Rabbi Yossi says, well, look, you violated 51 days, but we're only going to make you do 30 of them. Now, second example, again, 100-day Nazirut, you violated day 3 to 23. So now you've only violated on 21 days. So now that you violated on 21 days, so you are you would, according to both the rabbis and Rabbi Yossi, you would have to make up 20 days. Now, if on the other hand, because in the case of, I apologize because I'm not actually right, because in the case, if it was day 3 to 23 that you violated, because you have, according to Rabbi Yossi, 24 through 100 to complete your Nazirut, you don't have to make up any days, because you have 30 more days. But if, in fact, you were to have a 30-day Nazirut and you made a mistake between day 3 and 23, then you would have to make up for those 21 days.
In a couple months.
That'd be almost three, a little over 3 months. That's exactly right. Okay.
What is the mistake here that he made?
Oh, the mistake that he made is he thought that his you mean what is the so let's just be clear. When you say that what is the mistake that he thought he made that would have allowed him to get out of the Nazirut? So we'll deal with 2 possibilities that we will see. I'm going to raise them now, and we'll see them in the Mishnah at the bottom of the page. Let's say that after he made the Nazirut, that all his animals were stolen, and so he doesn't have any animals, and so he thought he thought that he had clearly made a mistake. He had not intended to be able to be, he would not have wanted to be a Nazir if he knew his animals were going to be stolen. And he thought, oh, for sure the rabbis will let me out in this case.
Well, why
Or
wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they let him out?
we'll see that we're going to cover that issue. Or the other example that we will see at the end, a little bit further on today, is what happens if he thinks the Beit HaMikdash is going to be standing in a month when he ends his Nazirut, and it turns out the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed between when he made his Nazirut and the time. Again, that's another thing where if it happens after you made your Nazirut, you are going to be stuck.
This is all based on external circumstances beyond your control, rather than like, oh, I didn't know you couldn't drink wine or something.
Well, remember, I think we learned that if you actually thought you couldn't drink wine, you would be considered a Nazirut, because that's just that's too big a mistake. But we are going to come to these kind of issues exactly. And the point is that the that we are going to see is going to distinguish if the theft happened before you made yourself a Nazir, or if the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash happened before you made yourself a Nazir, but you just hadn't heard about it. Well, then your Nazirut would in fact be eliminated. So we're going to see that shortly, but that's the kind of mistake that we're talking about. So now, how do we answer this problem that our Mishnah does not seem to be either like the rabbis or Rabbi Yossi? So Ibayis Tema Rabbi Yossi, Ibayis Tema Rabbanan. Actually, we can understand our Mishnah and explain it according to Rabbi Yossi or the rabbis. Ibayis Tema Rabbi Yossi, Kan Benazirus Meruba, Kan Benazirus Muetes. That, as I showed, if in fact we're talking about a long Nazirut and you had 100 days and you violated from day 3 to 23, well then again in that you're not going to have to make up any of those days. And so I think I got it wrong in the connection with the 3 to 53. It would really have to be 3 to like 83. If you violated all of those days, well, then you'd have to make sure that you make up so that at least 30 days at the end, you had a straight run of 30 days of Nazirut, according to Rabbi Yossi. And according to the rabbis, you have to make up every day. So according to Rabbi Yossi, if we're talking about a long Nazirut and the problem is in the early days, well, then you won't have to, in the end, make up really anything because you'll have more than enough time.
So what's the definition of a long Nazirut? Is there a bright line?
It means in this context that you will end up with 30 days left after your violation ends. So when you go to the rabbi,
60 days or something?
Well, it depends on when you go to the rabbi to ask for it to be undone, right? So if you violated from day 3 to day 47 and you had a 60-day vow, that wouldn't be long enough because you'd be only left with 13 days. But if you violate from day 3 to 27, then you had a 60-day vow, then you would have enough. So it depends on the length of the violation and the length of but the key is basically what long is. If we put it in quotation marks, what long here means is just that after you find out that, whoops, I really am not getting out of this vow, you still have 30 days left. That is what long would mean. And in that situation, according to Rabbi Yossi, there would be no need to do even one additional day. And so as a result, that's the situation according to Rabbi Yossi. Now, according to just to make sure I got this right on the screen. Where the Nazir will be able to count all days of violation over 30. I probably need to clarify that. What I mean is that there are at least 30 days left for him to after the violation. So okay, and now not only that, but we can even say and kan benazirut muetes. And here, when Rabbi Yossi says that you're going to have to repeat 30 days, we're talking about a short Nazirut where there's less than 30 days left. So as a result, that's why you're going to have to repeat those days. And we can even say that our Mishnah is like the rabbis. But there you're going to have to reword the Mishnah. So lo tema misha shenazar. Don't say that we count the time from when he made the vow. Ela ema Kimisha, meaning that you're going to Shanazar. You begin it as if you as if you are starting again, is really what it means. So it is a total reread of our Mishnah. So our Mishnah would be completely reread to say that when you in the situation where you violated the thing, violated the Nazirut, and you then went to ask the Chacham, you will need to start all over again in order to complete your vow. And so it literally means the opposite of the way you would naturally read our Mishnah. Okay, so that is how we've now reread our Mishnah, either according to Rabbi Yossi or according to the rabbis. Because apparently there is no other brisa, and there's no other third party that can. Our brisa is our Mishnah is nameless. And so it's got to be somebody, and we need to find an authority that agrees with this. And so the fact that we don't have a named authority in our Mishnah, and now I don't know why we don't say, well, it's not Mishnah Rameir, but I guess the rabbis in that other brisa are, presumably include Rebbe Meir. And so unless we have a basis to say that this is a new opinion, it should match some opinion that we have somewhere else on the same topic. So,
Why is Rebbe? Okay.
okay. So the point is that the only other place where this is talking about, those are the two sides of the argument. Exactly. If there was another side to the argument, we would have heard that opinion somewhere. So nishal l'chachamim le'tiruhu. So in the case where where the a vow was annulled, so now Amar Rebbe Yirmiyah midibeit Shammai nishmal debate Hillel. From the question or from the Beit Shammai's approach, we can learn something about Beit Hillel. So because Beit Shammai was being lenient, even in the to say that even though in general they say when a mistake in hektish is hektish, but in this case they would say that it's not. So lav amri Beit Shammai hektish betos havi hektish, because after all, Beit Shammai says that a mistake in hektish is a hektish. Kevan de igli milsa de lav shapir nazir, but in this case, because we see that in fact he did not properly become a nazir, so tete v'tira be'eder, the animal can go out and graze with the flock, meaning it's not hektish. So Beit Hillel nami, so even Beit Hillel would agree to this argument, and they would say in the following: Afagafta amri tamura betos havya tamura, when it comes to a substitute animal, because if you have an animal that is supposed to be a shlamim and you say I want animal A shlamim status to go to animal B because I'd rather offer animal B than animal A, well, that does not work. And indeed, both animal A and animal B become shlamim, and you have to bring both of them as sacrifices. So if on the other hand, they would bring cows, exactly. And so if in fact that were to happen, so hani mili hechid ise leikar hektish, that is as long as the original hektish, the original shlamim hektish, stays good. But about hechad mit aker ikar hektish, it aker nami tamura. But if in fact it turns out that you never in fact made animal A shlamim, you only thought you did, and now you thought you were moving that to B, but it turns out that animal A was never hektish in the first place, well, then Beit Hillel would say that animal B is also not hektish. And so that is the lesson that we are learning from Beit Shammai to Beit Hillel. So Amar Mar, so now we go to the next case in our Mishnah. So Iatem modim, and again, we're talking about the Beit Shammai's reply to Beit Hillel. Iatem modim sheilu karolat shi asiri. Don't you admit to me that if you call the ninth one the 10th, etc. So Itmar. So we learned Meiser when it comes to Meiser Behema, Rav Nachman Amar Ta'uso v'lo kavanaso, that if you say accidentally that the 9th one is the 10th one and the 10th one is the 9th one and the 11th one is the 10th one, well, then all three will be hektish. But if you were to do it intentionally, so then only the 10th one is hektish. The extra ones would not be hektish. And Rav Chisda, Rabba Bar Rav Huna Amrei, Ta'uso v'chol shekain kavanaso, that if you make a mistake, it becomes hektish, and certainly if you try to do it, it becomes hektish. So Amrale Rava Rav Nachman. So Rava asked Rav Nachman, I don't understand. right? L'didach de'amra ta'usa v'lo kavanaso, right? You're the one who says that it's only if you make it as a mistake, but if you do it deliberately. Well, 1 second, when we had the debate between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel in our Mishnah, the Ka'amr Beit Shammai le Beit Hillel, when Beit Shammai said to Beit Hillel, "Iatem modem she'ilu karu l'tshi asiri al asiri t'shi v'lachadasar asiri shishloshtan mekudashin." You know that if you do 10, 9, 10 with the 9th, 10th, and 11th animals, that all three are hektish. V'ishtiku Beit Hillel, and Beit Hillel was silent. Now, of course, Beit Hillel was not silent. Beit Hillel said, "Well, what about number 8 and number 12?" What it means is, well, Beit Hillel was silent with respect to saying anything about 9, 10, and 11. But according to you, Rav Nachman, they should have said, yes, the 9th, 10th, and 11th, all three become hektish, but that's only because you made a mistake. And so as a result, if you were to do it intentionally, it would not actually have worked. And so as a result, that you could have limri lahon, Beit Hillel should have said back to them, Mala maser shekain eno hektish eno kaddish b'kavana. That's a completely different story. There, in the case of the Meiser Behema, the animals only can be hektish when you don't have intention. So as a result, and if you do have an intention, it doesn't even work. So as a result, you can't learn from that to over here. And Amar Rav Shimi Bar Ashi, well, 1 second. Rav Shimi Bar Ashi says, 1 second, maybe Hainu Taima Delo Amar Lahon. Maybe the following would be the reason that Beit Hillel didn't say this to Beit Shammai. De Kal V'chomer hu, because Beit Shammai could respond that with the following Kal V'chomer. Ma Maser, when it comes to Meiser Behema, She'enu Kaddish B'kavana, that according to Rav Nachman, it doesn't work if you have intention, Kaddish B'tos, but yet it works when you confer, when you do the Kedusha by accident, namely you say 10, 9, 10 and you didn't realize it, well then hektish, then it is hektish. So in which case, then hektish, when it comes to formal hektish, as opposed to Meiser Behema, shekadosh b'kavana, where when you do try to sanctify something intentionally, it does work. Lo kol shekain, shouldn't it certainly work in connection with an unintention? So that would be the kal v'chomer, but the lohi. But Rav Shimi points out that it's not really that good of a kal v'chomer, de hektish b'daita de mare tali, because really everybody understands that hektish relies on the owner's intent, and here the owner has, whereas by Meiser Behema, it doesn't, and we have a Xeris HaKasav that says that it doesn't, according to Rav Nachman. And so, as a result, the point is you can't. This Kal V'chomer is not a valid Kal V'chomer, and so once again we have a question to Rav Nachman. And so, although the Gemara doesn't answer the question, but it seems like the Gemara leans towards the other viewpoint, namely the viewpoint of Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Rav Huna, that namely that even that whether you do it by mistake or you do it deliberately, if you do 10, 9, 10 for the 9th, 10th, and 11th animals, all three will be Kodesh. Okay, so that brings us to the next Mishnah, which again raises what was the mistake that maybe somebody might have made that in one case could result in their vow being valid, and in another case could result in their vow being not valid. So Misha Nadar ben Nazir, somebody made themselves a Nazir, and he goes to bring his animal, Umatza Shaginignava, and he finds that it's been stolen. Im ad shelo nignava behemto nazar. If before it was stolen, he made himself a Nazir. So harei Nazir, then he's a Nazir because the animal wasn't stolen yet. But as we turn to Lamed Bet Amabet, the im mishin nignava behemto nazar. But if he became a Nazir after his animal is stolen, well then ain't Nazir. Then he's not a Nazir. So v'zo taus ta Nachum Hamadi, and this is the mistake that Nachum Hamadi made. That what happened? Kisha'ala Nazirim in a Golo, you had Nazirim come up from the Golos in order to offer their sacrifices at the end of their Nazirut. And as we saw before, you'd have to again observe some amount of the Nazirut over again in Israel. Umatzo Beit HaMikdash Charav, and they found that the Beit HaMikdash, the second Beit HaMikdash, had been destroyed. So Amar Lahem Nachum Amadi, and so Nachum Amadi said, Ilu Hayitim Yodim Shebeit HaMikdash Charav. If you had known that the Beit HaMikdash was going to be destroyed, Hayitim Nozrim, would you had made yourselves Nazirim? And Amru lo, and they said to him, no, of course not. We wouldn't have made ourselves Nazirim. V'hitiru Nachum Amadi, and Nachum Amadi said that they were released from their vows, similar to if they were to say, oh, I didn't know that my animals were going to be stolen, and if I had known that my animals were going to be stolen, I wouldn't have made myself a Nazir. The Kishaba Davar Eitzel Chachamim. However, when the Chachamim heard about this, Kol Nazir Ad Amru, they said, Kol Nazir Ad Shalo Charav Beit HaMikdash. Anyone who made themselves a Nazir before the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Nazir, they are a Nazir. Mishacharav Beit HaMikdash ain't a Nazir. And if they did not, then they are not a Nazir. And the reason is that we have a principle called Nolad, a principle called Nolad. I apologize. That in fact, the concept of Nolad is the following: that if you have something that is an unpredictable and a future event that has not yet happened, that cannot serve as the basis of you getting out of a vow. And we saw this issue come up in Maseches Nedarim. And let's take a look. And Amar Rabba says, as we open the Gemara, Tafuhu Rabbanan l'Rabbi Eliezer v'okmi b'shitasayu, that the sages, that the rabbis convinced Rabbi Eliezer to join their approach. Ditznan, because we have a Mishnah in Maseches Nedarim that says Poschin b'nolad, that we are able to release a vow based on nolad, based on an unexpected development. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. The Chachamim Osrim, but the Chachamim say that's not true. So how does that show that in fact Rabbi Eliezer changed his mind? So we need to take a look at the Rush. So if we take a look at the Rush on Amabet, it's an outer column, and it is about 15 lines down. So Amar Rabbi, it has the Gemara in brackets just before it. So Amar Rabba Shitafu Rabbanan l'Rebbe Eliezer leukmei b'shidisaihu Shitafuhu v'heviruhu misfarato. He was convinced away from his to go away from his point of view. V'hodol divrayim, and he admitted what they said. Sha'arei Rebbe Eliezer haya b'shas hachorban, because Rebbe Eliezer lived at the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. K'de'isa b'perak hanizakin, as we learn in Perak hanizakin, Rebbe Eliezer v'Rebbe Yoshua naso mitaso shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was in Yerushalayim, and he needed to go meet with Vespasian, the leader of the invasion, to try and convince him to let the rabbis go and to try and keep Yavne. And so they took him out. Kishahotziu Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Eliezer was one of the people who took them out of Yerushalayim, took Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai out of Yerushalayim. So we know that he was there at the time of the destruction. So Nimtz Shahaya Ba'oto Minyan Kisha Amru Chachamim L'Nachum Shita. So as a result, in our Mishnah, the fact that we had all the rabbis saying to Nachum that he had made a mistake, that those rabbis must include Rabbi Eliezer. And so as a result, that's how we know. Below Amar Davar, and he didn't say anything. So Alma Shechazar Misvarato V'hodol Divrei Chachamim. So we see that he changed his mind and agreed to what the Chachamim said. Okay, so V'amar Rava. Now we're going to have a few different. I'm sorry, I didn't scroll my screen. We're going to have a few different viewpoints here, where of how we are going to of what might have been responded to or how Nachum Hamadi might have been able to get out of the situation. So Amar Rava v'afal gavda Amar Rabbanan ein potchem benolad, even though everybody agree, the rabbis all agree that you cannot get out of a vow through nolad. About potchem b'tanai nolad, you can get out of a tonight, some kind of condition based on an unexpected development. And what does that mean? Hechidami, what are we talking about? So Amr Lahon, if we were to say to people, Ilu asach inish, if a person were to come to you, v'amr lachon decharev Beit Hamikdash, that the Beit Hamikdash, and they would say to you that the Beit Hamikdash is going maybe destroyed. Mi have a nedrisun, would you have made a neder? So the point is the following: if I were to tell you, if you had known that the Beit Hamikdash at this was going to be destroyed, that is not a way that you can get out of a vow. But if I were to tell you that Stan over here told you that the Beit Hamikdash might be destroyed, and would that have been enough for you to think, you know what, it might be destroyed? I don't want to become a Nazir because I'll be stuck as a Nazir forever if I become a Nazir. So would that have been enough for you to regret it? And then if you say yes, well, then I'll be able to get you out of the vow. So even though the destruction itself can't serve as a mechanism, the possibility of the destruction, if it was suggested to you, could serve as a mechanism. Amar Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef says, Havai Hassam, if I were there, Hava Amina Lahon, I would have responded on behalf of Nachum Hamadi, Hakasiv. We have a pasuk that tells us there's going to be 3 Beit HaMikdashes, and so the second Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed because Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem Hema. It says it literally those words 3 times in a row. It says in Yirmiyahu. So as a result, that hints to the fact that there would be 3 Beit Mikdash. So Zem Mikdash Rishon, Mikdash Sheni. So the first 2 references are to the destruction of the first and the second Beit HaMikdash. So Nehidi Yadin Lahon Yichro. Well, 1 second. Just because you know that the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed, you don't know when. Should not be good enough to tell us. Because again, if you say that it is a predictable event, then that is not considered nolad. Nolad only is something that is not predictable. So Amar Abaye, the lo yadin la'emas. 1 second, are you telling me we didn't know when the Beit HaMikdash was going to be destroyed? V'haksiv shavuyim shivim nechtach al amucha al ir kadshecha. We have a pasuk in Daniel that says that there are going to be 77s in which there's going to be a decree upon your people and on the city. So the Rush helps us understand this. And if you take a look at the last of the narrow lines in the Rush on the right-hand side of the page, Al Amcha Val Ir Kadshecha, Perish Shmitot Ayin. You have 70 Shmitot. That's 70 times 7, which is 490. Dahainu Taf Tzadik, that's 490. Shana, 490 years. Nigzer Shiyeh ben Churban HaEchad LeChurban HaSheni. So there will be 2, that is the number of years between the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Dahainu Ayin Shel Galus, because there are 70 years of Galus between the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and the building of the second Beis HaMikdash. Galus Bavel. The B'Tav Chaf Sha'amad Beit Sheni, and then there were 420 years that the second Beit HaMikdash stood. So 420 plus 70 is 490, which is 70 times 7. So we knew Umishani, all right, and we knew, yeah, that's right, Umishani, and now the Gemara answers, and we can both follow it in the Rush as well as in the Gemara itself. Da'akati lo yade be'ezi yom. But it's still true, you didn't know which day. And so if we take a look back in the Gemara, Ba'akati miyadian b'ha yom, did we know which day? Right? So I b'tchilat shana, and now jump back to the end of that Rush. We didn't know whether it was going to happen at the beginning of the year or the end of the year. And so as a result, that's why we didn't, you can't say that Rav Yosef's defense would have been valid. Rav Yosef's defense would not have been valid. And so as a result, we end up with the problem that in fact, Nachum Hamadi should not have released people from their vows of Nazirut when they thought that the Beit HaMikdash was standing when the Beit HaMikdash was standing when they made their vow, even though when it came time for them to bring their sacrifices, the Beit HaMikdash had been destroyed.
Yeah,
Now,
but they should have issued a warning. Warning. Any person who becomes a Nazir this year is liable to be a Nazir for the rest of his life.
yeah, that would have been good.
And you could say because you didn't post the warning, so how the other thing is like how were the people really supposed to know, or was this like
And of course,
limited?
we have all the Gemaras about why we lost the Beit
Right.
HaMikdash. So how do you understand that it's 490 years and then in fact, you ask excellent questions where the questions are much better than the answers.
Right. No, I understand. You can't
There's
answer
another
it, but
issue, which is, at least if you read Josephus, nobody expected the Beit HaMikdash was going to be destroyed.
this is an alternative history here. I mean, but
Yeah, I mean,
also this is a
This is
post
Harry
facto.
Turtledove applied to 2,000 years ago. It's
Right.
and that nobody expected. The Romans didn't even think they were going to burn it down.
So I will just, yeah, I'm right. My
Well,
understanding is that the person who was leading the charge was surprised that his people burned it
Well,
down.
I think you could understand this machloket in a more philosophical way
Oh,
about like
100%. That's exactly how.
I mean, the rabbis don't want to admit that Judaism has changed because the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. That's why you can't get out of being a Nazir. Or you could say you can get out of a Nazir because it's a fundamental shift in and therefore like it's a break, and therefore what happened before doesn't carry over to what happened after.
That is an interesting perspective. Also, I'll just note as an introduction to tomorrow that we learned the first part of this Mishnah about these 6 people who are walking along, and they all talk about the people who are coming towards them, and that whether or not they're going to be a Nazir because of who it is or who it isn't. And Beit Shammai ends up saying that they're all Nazirim, but we did not hear what Beit Hillel said about those people. So to find out what Beit Hillel said, you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. And I'll note that in at least discussion with Charlie, we're pretty sure, but we're not 100% sure that tomorrow's daf is actually the shortest daf. So it's nice that we'll leave the Mishnah for that daf. There's literally no Gemara on Lamed Gimel Lamed Bet. There's a lot of Tosos, but that Tosos is not for, a lot of those Tosos are actually for earlier Gemaras and not necessarily all on Lamed Gimel. But I am sure that it will be a fascinating and interesting day nonetheless. And so I wish you a wonderful Shabbos and look forward to continuing our learning together.
45
Yeah,
minutes
probably
after
could.
the end of Shabbat.
It almost certainly will be Motzi Shabbat, 45 minutes or so after Havdalah. Yeah, we
Shabbat
could.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Have a great day, everybody.
Yashar Kar.
What time is Sundays? Make it Marvin.